Welcome to the License to Lead podcast. I'm Patty Fay. This podcast is for physicians or anyone who thinks healthcare needs a transformation led by physicians. License to Lead means that physicians are charged with and must be in charge of guiding the vision and the culture of healthcare systems. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the License to Lead podcast. My two podcasts in May celebrate Mother's Day and, as always, promote excellent organizational cultures and physician leadership. This episode's a departure from the norm because my guest isn't a physician or healthcare worker. Cory Katuna has a degree in business and Spanish and a minor in graphic design, and she actually uses these skills in her work, which she will talk more about. You might recognize Cory's voice because she recorded the audio that wraps up every License to Lead podcast. Most importantly to me, of course, is that Cory Katuna is my daughter. We recorded this show starting at sunrise from the roof of a hacienda in the central Yucatan Peninsula. We were at treetop level, and you might notice a few other voices joining in on our conversation. The birds of the Yucatan were waking up. Cory talks about the Venn diagram where her work and her interests intersect mine, and especially where they intersect the License to Lead podcast. She zeroes in on levels of energy based on a book written by psychotherapist Bruce Schneider. The book is titled Energy Leadership. I noticed that I used the word attachment several times in this podcast without clarifying what I mean. So when I say I'm attached to somebody behaving a certain way or to some outcome, then I'm going to get triggered or feel threatened if things don't go the way I think they should. And should is the operative word here. Often we're attached to how other people behave. We have expectations or shoulds for them that they never agreed to. This is really common in our families and at work. And so when we're attached to things that are actually out of our control and we get triggered, then all these negative emotions can grab hold and we're not able to think as well. We're not able to access our prefrontal cortex or to be creative or to see more possibilities. When we're less attached, it means we're accepting the current reality and we're able to see more possibilities to make choices or to change things. At the end of this podcast, I do a fact check of myself and give you a little bit more information about what's coming up next and about those other voices that you hear in this podcast. Enjoy. All right. Well, good morning. How
good
cool.
Morning.
Isn't this fantastic to be together?
Just hours before you leave.
Yes. So I've been here with my daughter, Cory Katuna, on the Yucatan Peninsula in Merida, Mexico. I'll let her pronounce it accurately.
Merida,
Mexico. So we've been together a month. And we want to have a conversation about work life, maybe life. How can we make sure that we're actually feeling and being fulfilled in our lives, which such a huge part of our lives include our work lives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yesterday for Mother's Day, we had a conversation about this podcast. We kind of knew we wanted to do an episode. I'm the only one in the family who's not a doctor or doctor in training, and her podcast is totally physician oriented for the most part. So we kind of found that where the Venn diagram intersects, I suppose, where her world and my world intersect, and it's around service to others and happiness and culture and being your best self, which translates immediately over into retention and happy employees and happy clients or patients and improved bottom line, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, all the important elements of the organizational culture that lead to increased engagement then turn around and result in all the right outcomes for the business itself. So if you focus on making sure that the people who are doing the work are engaged and fulfilled and use their talents, reach a level of mastery, fulfill some intention or purpose that they have in life through their work, all of that turns around and results in the best things happening as far as the actual business. Cory, I wonder if you would give the listeners some idea of what you're up to, what you're about.
Mm-hmm. I work with Bentinho Massaro, who is a spiritual teacher, and we give retreats all over the world right now. We're in Yucatan because we just had a retreat which you came to, and you've been here with us for about a month.
How do you support Bentinho? How do you work with him?
Well, I started off as a graphic designer. Really what we have going on is a startup kind of environment where everybody does everything. So we run retreats, write books, we have a social media presence, do all kinds of different events, online events, coaching, all kinds of stuff. So we all plug in exactly where it makes sense for us to plug in each time. So I could say I'm a graphic designer, I could say I'm a copy editor, I could say I'm a coach, I could say I'm a workshop facilitator, all that stuff applies. Even event coordinator, even executive assistant, all this stuff applies. And I remember I used to study culture at the first company I worked for right after college. And I got super into culture, organizational culture, just what makes a place wonderful and retains employees and brings out the best of me and my coworkers. And I was kind of on that search after I left that organization. Like, does it exist? Like, does 10 out of 10 organizational culture exist yet? And
what would that mean to you?
Okay, so the thing is, I can't do anything that doesn't really resonate. I can't override that. So if something isn't true and aligned, and even if it's a long-term thing, it's that sort of, this is the right track. Like, this is fulfilling to me. If it doesn't have that signature, I can't override it for long and persist and stick with something. It would be an organization that brings out the best of me. So I sort of used myself as the barometer, just seeing, my skills and my potential and whatever, and feeling underutilized, or like the structure in the organizations that I would work for couldn't quite bring the best out of me, no matter how hard I tried or we tried. So this organization has been the first that's brought the best out of me. That's, made me feel like, yeah, this is exactly where I'm meant to be. Here's skills that I didn't even know I had. Attention span I didn't even realize I had. Bandwidth I didn't even realize I had.
What a great element in a description of organizational culture, that it would tap into all the best parts of you.
This work is just all about helping people tap into what's most important to them. And in my words, I would say living a deathbed life. Like, what's the life that'll have you on your deathbed feeling like, yeah, perfect, wonderful, beautiful, no regrets. Not that retrospective where it's like, damn, why didn't I ... So if I could sort of nutshell this work, that's what I would say it's about.
Wow. I think that is exactly what I would love to get into with regard to physicians and physician culture.
Nice.
Is how is it possible for physicians to have a sense that they can achieve that they've got this profession that they worked so hard to get into, have had such passion around, and they find themselves feeling burdened or burned out or suffering from moral injury, which is something, that is really kind of a hot topic now, where people are, have an obligation to patients and have taken an oath and have a strong sense of what is important to patients, and they feel like they can't do it. They are unable to do it, constrained schedule-wise or physically or from sheer exhaustion, and they fall short of their own standards as far as patient care.
Damn.
And communication with patients and caring for patients. I had days where I could get to the end of the day and I didn't like any of my patients. I would on Friday dread going into work on Monday. And what a way to live, and how awful for I love physicians and so respect the rigor and the work and the dedication. And I just think it's so regrettable beyond belief for physicians then to be in a career that is harrowing instead of extraordinarily fulfilling.
Yeah. What's the oath?
Well, the Hippocratic Oath, the obligation to patients that we're there to serve and care for patients and to do no harm. It's very easy to feel like you're doing harm sort of interpersonally with patients if you're rushed and they've got a list and the list fills you with dread because you're already 40 minutes behind. So it doesn't have to mean actual physical injury to a patient, but just not being able to really provide the care and caring for the patients, that they're there for human connection and to be understood. Mm-hmm. And if a physician is burned out, exhausted, overwhelmed, they don't have any bandwidth. They don't have the capacity to extend to the patients. There have been a couple of recent podcasts with two physicians who are in independent practices, and one left a corporate practice to create exactly what we're talking about. Dr. Jen Lentz, who is in a direct primary care practice, can spend the amount of time she wants to spend with a patient. And she is so fulfilled, and it's working. And she's happy now. She's not waiting for retirement or a week-long stressed-out vacation to be happy.
So what's the difference between her and most physicians then? The ones who are burning out? And
probably a big picture scenario is for the younger physicians, they come out of medical school and residency, maybe $250,000 to $500,000 in debt. And the idea of then starting a practice, an entrepreneurial practice, is just inconceivable, daunting to say the least, and inconceivable is probably even more accurate. Mm-hmm. They can't imagine taking a risk and going further in debt, so they sign up with a hospital system or healthcare system or some big organization where they'll be on salary and have their schedule handed to them and have the rules handed to them. And once they realize that it's not at all what they envisioned as practicing in the profession of medicine, then if they've got kids, they're settled in, they're in the school system, they've signed a non-compete contract, so they'd have to move the whole family someplace. And it's really what I'm railing against so much is the commoditization of physicians, the corporatization of healthcare. And my shortcut answer, necessary but not sufficient, is that physicians have to lead their own profession. Mm-hmm. So we've got to get physicians to take ownership and leadership and find a way to...
Well, that's a pretty steep climb to go from sort of this trapped... really that is what it feels like. It is almost a state of victimization to go from that stuckness to leadership. So that's why I ask about Jen. So what made her different? What made her sort of take the leap from feeling stuck in a system that commoditizes you to running her own practice and, doing it her way?
I think she hit a wall of exhaustion. She has 4 kids, and she talks in the podcast about not seeing her kids in the morning for years, basically having so much leftover work that she had to get up at 6 and get into the clinic to finish up work from the day before and then get started all over again. I think she hit that wall, and why she in particular wasn't going to tolerate it, wasn't going to put up with it, that I'm not sure.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's sort of that's the code to crack, in my opinion. I mean, I feel like you can come at it from 2 angles. I'm sympathetic to how an environment dictates the behavior of the person in many cases, and how systems can feel really oppressive and be really oppressive. But I think the more interesting thing is the rise in energy of the individual, or the breakthrough of the individual, or the courage or the ownership of the individual. And especially in this case with physicians, super educated, compassionate, balanced people. I mean, if anybody should be able to raise their energy, do a simple task like perceive something with optimism instead of pessimism, or just do sort of, I guess I would call it basic spiritual work, it would be a physician, I think. So it might just be a matter of showing them an alternative option, that the stuckness isn't something that they have to put up with. But that's actually another important thing to break through, because physicians go through, I know this now because Jamie, my sister, is in med school, and she's been just grinding for years. Just logistical, sort of bureaucratic stuff that you get put through in the process. And I think the main ethos, one of the ethos, I should say, not the main one, in med school is to just suck it up and persist and go through the hard thing. That's kind of almost like what makes it's like a hazing process. It's like, let's filter people out.
Early on, so really filtering people out in undergrad, and then with the testing, and then with the admissions process. And then, so that's the hazing and filtering out. And once in medical school, it's much more of the just suck it up. It's just an awful possibility as a medical student to even consider not continuing, not making it, not getting through it, because it's taken so much to get there.
See, that's the toughest thing, because that is training. As a med student, you're not just being trained in the content, you're also being trained in temperament. So doctors have been trained to put up with hard stuff, to put up with systems that don't fulfill them or reward them or support them even, that in fact burn them out. I mean, that's part of the training, sucking it up and dealing with shitty systems. So here we have this deathbed standard.
Yeah, there's so many of these elements. I mean, there's this long, arduous on-ramp to get in, and then the achievement of getting in.
Yeah.
All kinds of sunk costs, emotional, spiritual, financial, interpersonal, social sunk costs up the wazoo. But your point being that they are in medical school being trained to suck it up, being trained to put up with stuff that is incongruous with their well-being.
Right. Yeah, so then at this point it's an educational issue, and I wouldn't say educational in terms of like educate people how to start their own practice, but to educate people about their emotional options or vibrational options, if you'll
Indulge.
Entertain me.
So it does seem like the deck is kind of stacked against physicians, given this long on-ramp in, which is all these sunk costs on every level, and then being in medical school, and nobody on the planet, or a vanishingly slim number of people who have ever been in medical school, actually want to get back out again. So what do you see as a way for physicians to hang on to that sense of agency?
Mm-hmm. Nice. Well, what I would love to see is that all people, not just physicians, but that everyone has about 100 times more awareness than they currently do of the ownership that they actually have, of the agency that they actually have over sort of the most important thing, in my opinion, which is their vibration, if you will. Or another way to say that is their attitude, which I know that sounds super cheesy, or their perspective, their point of reference, their state of being. It's super underrated. It's super underrated, especially in more like academic circles where it's just cut and dry and this is what we do. I know this. I've been raised by 2 doctors and surrounded by a bunch of smart people my whole life. But this vibrational work is the compass, like that you move the needle a tad on the compass, on the vibrational work, and you watch the far end of the needle move miles. So that's the work that I would love to see physicians take more ownership of or feel empowered around, which currently, I mean, if you're in any sort of situation where you are the recipient of how it's going and are somehow sort of victimized by a system, and I'm not discrediting the fact that systems and environment has an effect. I'm not ignoring that. But the fact that systems and environment have effects is no reason to ignore the main lever, which is your inner world or your energy or your state of being. And that is where the shift starts. It starts internally. So one thing I would just love to see for physicians, but not just physicians, but for everyone, is an awareness of the emotional guidance system. I took this terminology from Bentinho. Essentially what the emotional guidance system is the better you feel, the more aligned your thoughts are with reality. Or essentially the more accurately you are seeing. And the worse you feel, the more inaccurately you are thinking about or relating to life. There's little sort of exceptions to this, like you can be on drugs and feeling euphoric and seeing reality completely inaccurately, but it's more about your attitude, like your approach to what you're experiencing, that is in alignment. So the better you feel, the more in alignment your perspective or your thoughts are about reality or yourself or what's going on, what's possible. And one of the best models I've seen to help make sense of this emotional guidance system, to help sort of break it down and make it accessible, comes from Bruce D. Schneider. He's the founder of iPEC coaching. It's called The Levels of Energy. It completely gifts agency back to those who understand it and apply it.
And I actually learned about the levels of energy and Bruce Schneider from my colleague Lynn Elliott.
Yeah. Awesome. And this is one of the models that I have taught in boot camps. I've led a few programs called Breakthrough Boot Camp. This is one of the first things that I teach in boot camp. And it's something that I think about maybe daily still. It is applicable across the board in terms of being responsible, taking ownership of your state of being, where you're coming from. So let me map out this model for you a bit.
Cool.
So there are 7 levels of energy. Level 1, the lowest level, is victim. Up to the highest level 7 is genius or awareness, or sort of the beginnings of enlightenment, you could say. And then everything in between is a gradation between 1 and 7. So 1 is victimization or victim or apathy. 2 is anger or blame or control. 3 is going to be my favorite one to talk about because it's the most insidious, in my opinion. And it is complacency or tolerance. 4 is service or love, although I'm a little reluctant to call it love. And 5 is opportunity and optimism and possibility. And then up to 6 and 7, which might not be as applicable for this conversation. 6 is flow state, sort of peak creativity. And 7 is that awareness or genius or early enlightenment.
And we don't necessarily see that in big organizations.
Right.
That's not really consistent with bureaucracy.
For the purposes of this conversation and physician well-being and such, I think we can stay within the spectrum of 1 through 5.
Fantastic.
So level 1 is victim mindset, victim mentality. It feels apathetic. You feel super separate. You feel lethargic. Things are happening to you. You're the victim of it. Why me? It's just like the worst that we feel, basically. It's when you don't have a light of optimism. There's not a single glimmer of hope. It's just like, damn, this is about as good as it is ever going to be. You kind of can't see beyond just the darkness of your mind.
You might even interpret past happiness or pleasant feelings as bogus.
Totally. This is one of the hallmarks, in a way, of the emotional guidance system, or of the levels of energy, is every single one of them is so level 1, for instance, is a timeline. This is a cool perspective on this. It's a whole timeline. So when you're in level 1, your future looks like level 1. It looks like more apathy. Like the best you can imagine is just like getting through it and surviving and not too many more bad things happening to you. And your past is victim, as a victim experience. It's just things have always been bad. Even when I thought things were great, it was actually bad.
It's pervasive, just feeling of being sunk and hopeless. And I'm bad. My world is bad.
Yeah. Something's wrong with me. What is wrong with me? Why can't I figure this out? Man, this always happens to me. That kind of language. So that's the lowest level of energy. That's when you're the least accurate. You're observing things inaccurately, the least accurately.
You'll go through the other levels of energy, but this one is just some kind of combination of a tar pit and quicksand. I mean, you just can't get out, can't see out of it, don't even believe anything that you used to say about, oh, I should remember this the next time I'm feeling despondent or victimized.
Nice. Yes, exactly. The lower you go, the more convincing it is, the more seductive it is, the more you feel like, oh, this is actually the truth. Everything that felt good before was a myth, was, a legend, and this is how it actually is. So, and 1 is sort of the bottom of that. So level 2, 1 step up from victim mindset, victim mentality, is anger or blame. So this is stepping out of what's wrong with me to no, something's wrong with you. It's not me, it's you. And it's projecting that something being wrong outward, which is surprisingly a step up. It is a step up from just feeling utterly apathetic and down and just like you're the worst thing that ever graced the planet. I'll even guide people into level 2 if I can just feel that they're stuck in level 1. If they're really stuck in level 1, I have a playlist even on Spotify that's all kinds of like, it's like angry gangster rap. And I'll send it to people. I'll sort of encourage people to go to the gym and work out and burn this energy and get into sort of an angry mode just to pop out of that level 1, just to get out of the delusion of level 1.
Where might somebody find your gangster playlist?
It's called Cold, and it's on my Spotify, Cory Katuna.
Cool. And level 2, I also think of it as a hallmark of that as being control, a need for control. I have to control this, and right, wrong, good, bad.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, so level 2 is all about, it's that heat. It's like that fire, that anger, that blame, mad at the situation, mad at life, mad at your partner. Like, at least there's fire, as opposed to the utter just quicksand of level 1. Yeah.
And I think about how we respond to people at these levels of energy. So, we can be a little intrigued and not have that big or consistent of an aversion to people in level 2. Like if somebody's cynical, kind of angry, pissed off at the world, we don't mind that as much as the wide berth that we will give to people who are in this victimized state that just sucks everybody. It's just like this vortex that sucks your energy away when somebody's in a victimized state. So even that energy that we experience externally of somebody in these states, I think points to anger being, being more tolerable or palatable or better than feeling victimized. I don't know if you buy that or not.
Yeah, I think that applies. Although one of the benefits of level 1 is that it compels people to help you.
Oh, say more about that.
Well, some people are, in anything you do, there's a reason for it, right? So any pattern or habit or sort of recurring thing you do is to get something out of it, is because it pays off. So I've seen this where people have sort of a level 1 habit, almost like a level 1 personality, like a victim consciousness. And the payoff is that it has people helping, has people sort of leaning in and seeing, how can I help, and paying attention and being concerned. All right, so let me introduce you to my favorite level of energy, not in terms of experience, but in terms of, for educational purposes, my favorite one to expose. It's this little lurker that we all sort of endure, we tolerate. So in this is level 3, which is tolerance or complacency. It's the I'm fine level of energy. And this is just a slick little background slurpy. People go their whole lives in this state and never question it because it's fine. It's good. I'm good. No, I'm good. How are you? It's just like you can't get in there. And what's been so cool since I've been coaching and just coaching a lot of people at this point is to see the pattern of the I'm fine or of the tolerance, and how it affects me as a coach or as a physician with a patient or as a leader. How it will affect you is you almost draw a blank. It's like, all right, we could hang up, I guess. Like, all right, no point for this meeting. It's kind of just like, why are we even doing this? Because it's just fine. Basically the payoff for level 3 is you just get to go about your day without being too interrupted. You just get to have have your beer in the fridge and have your paycheck come every month, and like life just plugs along. And it's like the perfect setup for a miserable deathbed experience. That's the ultimate. Get to your deathbed and be like, what the F did I do with my life? It's the ultimate experience of that. So level 3 is one of my favorite to uproot because it is just so sneaky and hard to catch. And even just talking about it like this, you won't be able to unsee it now. It's just such a pervasive thing. You're going to notice it in yourself. You'll notice it in other people. And just the way it can affect a team. Like if you have a whole team of level 3 culture of tolerance or of complacency, you'll just, I'm sure big systems, this is sort of the pervasive energy for big systems, big organizations. You'll just see that like it's slow growth. People are all okay. Not a lot of possibility, not a lot of optimism, not a lot of service.
And I think of it as compromise and I'm the grown-up here.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, this really sucks and this is hard and this is what we have to deal with. This is what they're telling us to do. And let me just explain how this is important.
Jesus.
And it's like this tone of voice. It's like, I'm the grown-up. We are in this situation right now. And the suits are telling us that we have to do this. So we're going to do this. For leaders to be in level 3, to me, feels like such a betrayal of their profession and of the people in the organization, rather than providing a cone of protection for the people beneath them to thrive and use their talents and see bigger, better possibilities, instead of doing the hard work of whatever it would take to allow that to be the case. They are compromising on behalf of everybody. Yeah. Well, it just sucks. We got to deal with the union. We got to deal with the mucky mucks up in the corner office with the C-suite. We have to put up with the electronic health record that isn't. And
like you've put the flag in the ground. It'll be so hard to unsee that. I love how you said the grown-ups in the room thing, because one of the symptoms of this level of energy is that you feel like you're handling a situation as well as it can be handled. It's like you feel wise and on top of it and mature and like you're handling it right. So it's a hard one to sort of self-reflect on.
There are all these attachments. I also think of attachment as one element of the levels of energy. You have total attachment when you're level 1, attachment in the sense of being pervasively stuck. And then as you escalate through the levels of energy, you have fewer and fewer attachments. And
nice.
So at level 3, you're attached to being compliant, to a win-win. This is the win-win category.
Wow. I'm sure looking good and, keeping people appeased.
Right.
Keeping your job.
This is how it works. This is what it takes to keep our job, without even considering there might be 5 other possibilities, one of which is not keeping the job, one of which is taking your boss's job.
Yeah.
Another is staging a revolution. Another is creating a new department, and
et cetera, et cetera.
Et cetera. Exactly. Yeah.
Cool. Well, this to me, I just feel like I got a new angle on your podcast, which is that your whole mission, not just your podcast, but is popping the bubble of level 3 energy in healthcare across the world.
Oh, glory be to God. Yeah. That makes my heart sing, because I, like you, despise level 3. Yeah. And I've been there. It's not like we probably all circulate or cycle through all of these levels, right, or at least levels 1 through 5 all day long. Mm-hmm. So we're not, immune to any of them. But the idea is to feel what it is to be at the higher levels and live there and know about the spectrum, know about the options, know how to self-diagnose. So it's not just this sort of sheep-like blind complacency, putting up with whatever level you're in. This is just, you're not actually looking out at the world through that lens. You're also looking at the lens of the level of energy that you're in. You're also examining the lens and seeing that as one of the optional variables in your experience. Yes, the meta view, and really watching how you're thinking, watching and seeing. That's what meditation is. And I think, that's my rather novice view of it, but really the ability to see how you're thinking. We strayed.
You're sweating.
I'm sweating. By the way, we are up on the roof. And what's the name of our hacienda?
Sakchich.
And I'm leaving Cory. We've been together for a month, and I'm leaving for Cancun here in just an hour. And we're sitting on the roof, and I am sweating like a butcher.
Dropping sweat drip.
My face is raining. And as we're moving around here, I'll just mention you're hearing all kinds of fantastic birds in the background, especially white-winged doves and great kiskadees, which is a type of flycatcher. But back to...
I know all about that. My mom dragged me on a 16-hour bird watch.
It was fantastic. We had the time of our lives and went to Chichen Itza.
Chichen Itza. Nice.
So,
all right, let's move on to level 4.
yes.
Level 4, service. Yeah, this is a tricky one. So it sort of self-identifies as love. Somebody who's in level 4 will say it's love, but from the outside, it doesn't quite feel like that, although this is a level where service is a priority. Often in boot camp, when I talk about this model, I say there's a line. Above the line is levels of energy that spiral upward and are positive and constructive. And below the line are levels that spiral downward and are negative and destructive. So, and that line is drawn halfway through level 4. So there's a point in level 4 where your service to others is in order to get something out of them. I'm helping you so that you see me as the one who helps, or I can sort of validate my own identity as the good one, the helper, the one who's loving, the one who's of service to others. And then just above that line, there is being of service to others, being generous and helpful because you want to. And that's a tricky line to identify. You know, almost anybody's going to say that they're on the service to others purely in order to be of service to others side of that line. So it's tricky to find, oh, wow, I did that in order to look good to you, or in order to not disrupt that situation so I wouldn't have to deal with the awkwardness, or, you know, in order. So there's important distinction in 4 where it's fun to kind of see when you're doing stuff for other people, when are you doing it for yourself and when are you doing it for them? So what else do you notice about level 4? Like, how do you talk to people about level 4?
Level 4 sounds like such a constructive, positive, you know, attitude to have, to be in a place of service. And the way that I deflate that a little bit, I think, is it is by definition defining somebody else as being deficient, or a situation as being deficient and needing me. And so that to me is a little bit of the dark side of service and level 4 and all the giving. And of course, this is monster in healthcare, for physicians and nurses and others.
You might even notice this. I mean, especially if it's mostly physicians listening, but anybody, you know this. There's instances where you've just been lit up about something, like you're creating an event or you're making something for someone or you're cleaning. I've had this before where I've folded somebody else's laundry. I used to live with a bunch of girls and people would leave laundry in the dryer. And sometimes I'd be like, I'm just going to surprise these people and I'm going to fold their laundry for them. I'm going to do this when I put my own laundry. When I change my own laundry out, instead of leaving them a heap, I'm going to fold it all for them and make it all perfect. And just the joy that I would get out of that, as opposed to doing something because there's like an obligation, or I want to be the one who's helping. So you can feel the difference of this. You can feel where you get the payoff versus when you're just lit up and you just want to add value and help and be available and make things better for people.
Yeah, so I think at the high side of level 4 of this service and helping attitude is a lack of attachment, or a lot less attachment to the other person having a problem or needing me, or me needing to be the one that rides in on the white horse and fixes.
Yeah, nice. Especially that, me needing to be the one that rides in it. But overall, this level is an awesome level to have in an organization. So an organization that feels like level 4 is above the average by far. You know, there's like a level 4 culture would feel like people constantly helping each other. And sometimes it would be sort of self-serving help, but it would still be externally oriented and generous, and stuff would be moving forward.
Generous is a great word for level 4.
Right. So it's still a net positive. It's just worth tracking those attachments within it.
And I think you and I have talked about level 4 a lot and feel like we've uprooted the negative part of it. And that's not the usual way that level 4 is talked about, I would say.
Right.
Probably with Bruce Schneider's original work, even, that it is a relatively high level of energy and feels good in a organization. And most organizations are level 2. Level 3 is an achievement. You know, if people will compromise and just not be negative or, you know, angry or victim-y, that's like yeehaw.
True.
So level 4 in an organization, in a bureaucratic setting, is fantastic.
Yeah, that's right. So, and then thinking about going from level 3 to level 4, it's really about going from the defense, like just keeping things okay. I even sort of imagine it like, all right, stuff is coming at me and I'm on the defense and I'm just going to sort of make sure stuff is all right. To level 4 is where you are looking out, like you are coming up with stuff. You're going out of your way for things. You're looking for opportunities to help. So whether or not that is for your own ego boost or in service to others, you're still in a generous orientation.
I can remember one of the charts that Bruce Schneider uses. He talks about level 3 being win-win and level 4 being you win.
Cool.
It's that generosity and kind of robust service orientation.
Nice. So shall we move up to level 5?
Mm-hmm.
This might be my favorite level of energy. This level of energy is so practical. So it's fun to just see how useful it is, how accessible it is. This will be the level of energy that I think about. If I'm anything below it, I'll be like, all right, we're going to get into 5. Let me just shift up into 5. So it's right there. It's like hands-on. This level of energy is opportunity, optimism, possibility, what's possible. I think of it like looking out and letting everything come in, like a clean slate. You're not bound by whatever is at the moment. You're not working with the variables that are necessarily, although you totally can, but you're just not bound by them. You're not stuck in any way. You're looking at options. You're looking at possibilities. So one of the ways that I'll shift up into this, if I'm in anything less than level 5, is I'll use this mantra, nice. How is this nice? So just start with like, nice. Even if it's like, damn it. All right, nice. All right, now how is this nice? And you just look for proof that it's nice. So that's one of my favorite things about level 5 is it's more accurate. So there are always, if something seems really black and white or binary, you are not seeing things accurately because there are always infinite options. So level 5 just opens that up. It's almost like a portal, or like the spectrum goes from just orange and yellow to the full color wheel. And nice, all right, now how is this nice? Forces you to sort of open up that range of seeing and let all kinds of different options come in. What would you say about level 5?
So I'll come back to the decreasing attachment as we ascend the levels. So I'm not attached to the way things are. I'm not convinced that I have to do things the way they've been done before. I'm not attached to the outcome that's been prescribed for me. I am really open to all kinds of possibilities, utterly rejecting the binary thing. So the options could be I can stay in this job that is sucking the energy out of me and making me miserable, or I can quit and most likely be living under a bridge by the end of the year. What other options are out there? And in lower levels of energy, you don't ask for help or input because there's shame. Like level 1, we didn't use the word shame, but I think of that as being a biggie. And when you're in level 1 and probably level 2, you don't go to people and seek their generous input and look for other ideas and other options. Yeah, I think of this as the land of opportunity. This is where everything looks like an option. Anything is possible. Almost anything is possible, practically speaking, that you can definitely see more than a binary set of options. The huge thing here is not to be attached to asking for help, and if somebody says no, don't be attached to whether they helped or not. Go ask somebody else or go research it.
Right, well, in level 5, you wouldn't be. When you actually are in level 5 and you actually are seeing opportunities everywhere and you are sort of on the offense about creating whatever you want to create and coming up with stuff and looking at what's possible, and you ask for something and it gets denied, it's like, oh, nice. Cool. So it's not that. Like that, you actually genuinely feel like that. That's the actual response of somebody in level 5. There's no red light. Every red light is just 2 green lights in other directions. So there's no...
I like that.
Yeah. What I love about this is, again, that the emotional guidance system. The better you feel, the more accurately you are seeing the mechanics of life. So, and level 5 feels awesome. You feel great. You are seeing the creatorship, like the ball is in your court element of life and how life actually works.
I think for people who think that this sounds not very applicable to the perhaps drudgery of zooming in and out of exam rooms at a frenetic pace, coming home exhausted and then doing it all over again the next day. I think that it would help to remember when you have had this attitude or this sense that anything is possible, and try to tap into that and what is possible. Are you, and this is even where coaching is huge. You know, we talked about meditation being that point where you can step back and see your thoughts and emotions as not you, but as occurrences. Mm-hmm. And I think that when you're in a place and can't really see the options, that's when coaching makes such a big difference, because that becomes that external voice. That's that voice then that can say, well, I don't know. How about this? You know, did you think about this? And then I think the coach will come alongside and disabuse you of some notions of your limitations.
Yeah, replacing your internal monologue with somebody who's not biased against you.
Right. And that would be a whole conversation about the vast majority of us who have that very negative self-talk, which has been one of the most important things for me to overcome through the years. The biggest outcome of meditation and some of these practices, number one, is getting rid of that really nasty internal voice.
Just one thing I wanted to mention. You said it may seem impractical or inaccessible for people to sort of take on this like optimistic worldview when they're sort of in the drudgery of a 9-to-5 that is just draining, or more than 9-to-5 in many physicians' cases. Right there, that's your first opportunity, is how do you examine that option? So right there is where you can identify a level of energy, is how are you relating to this option? Is it, think about it, like right now you either have a 1 level of energy response, like, yeah, I can't, not, that doesn't apply to me, I can't do that. A level 2, like, what is this? What do these assholes think they're talking about? This is nothing to, these are fools. 3 is like, yeah, maybe. I kind of do think I have a level 5 energy. Things are pretty good. So I feel like that's that level 3, that sneaky little munchkin. 4 might be, that's awesome. It's beautiful. I want to share that with my coworkers and make sure everybody gets this. And level 5 might just be like, oh, that's awesome. Like, oh yeah, nice. Like,
rock on.
Yeah, because there are options. So how you relate to anything, how you relate to any new information or anything, how you relate to anything is how you relate to everything. So this is a great barometer right here. How you relate to something, like, yeah, you can have an optimistic perspective in a shitty situation. How you relate to that proposition is a great indicator of where you hang out in terms of level of energy. Level 6 is like a flow state, like a peak creative state, being in the zone.
I think it's a big part of why surgery can be so appealing. They get in the zone and they're well supported. By definition, the surgeon has a team around him or her, and they're well supported to get in there and use their skills, their mastery, and they're passionate about this, and they've got an outcome that they're aiming for. And so you'll definitely hear that they will experience a flow state.
Cool. So that's level 6, and level 7 is what I dedicate most of my life to these days: awareness, or genius, or ultimate wisdom. And one way I like to look at it is it's beyond your psychology. So it's awareness of awareness, or like 2 steps back from all of the goings on of your human body and what you're doing and what's happening in the world and what's around you. It's actually the changeless awareness that tracks all of that. If you're interested in a topic like that, you might want to check out Bentina Massaro, which is who I work with.
You and I are talking about physicians and everybody understanding where they're coming from, in the words of Anurag Gupta, who talks about the importance of paying the most attention to where are you coming from, and that's these levels of energy. This is attending to your purpose. So that's very important. But sort of a sham approach to that, in my opinion, is having a yoga class or a meditation session, or installing a chief wellness officer in an organization in lieu of fixing clear structural problems.
Totally.
So and any thoughts about sorting that out? Because I feel like I'm strident about it, and then here we are talking about wellness in a way. I even kind of eschew that word because of these associations with this
trend, and it's kind of blaming the doctors for something, and you go get well, and then you'll better tolerate this electronic medical record or this impossible schedule.
The solution, in my opinion, is having as many people as possible grok the levels of energy or the emotional guidance system, or to take responsibility for where they're coming from. So I get that that's an educational question, how to get large groups of people familiar with semi-spiritual or sort of empowerment topics, like changing where you're coming from, or like mastering your level of energy or your attitude, or releasing attachments, etc. So topics like that, just the basics of those can utterly replace a need for some sort of wellness protocol, and can empower people to make whatever changes they need in their organization, really. So, I mean, it's a practical thing. Either they'll leave,
right,
or they'll, but either way, the demand will go up for a proper system. Once you feel good and you feel aligned and you're
seeing possibilities.
Yeah, and you're seeing potential, and you're happy, and you feel fulfilled, and you're generous, and you're not bogged down by the same stuff that you've been bogged down, and people can see that change in you. It's contagious. People want what you've had. Could even apply to the administration of a big system. Like it just applies across the board. It's just people. For me, the biggest thing is to get information like this to spread, because it can replace all the compensatory strategies, just the infinite compensatory stuff we have going on to make up for the fact that we're not handling it at the source, which is what this work addresses, is solving problems at the source instead of the enormous, expensive, roundabout ways that we do it today.
I think one outcome of people paying attention to their level of energy and being determined to live a, as you call it, a deathbed life, not to wait to be happy, not wait to understand their kids' psyche better, not wait to have like a little different relationship with their significant other or their work or their patients, but to insist on having that. And today, one of the outcomes of that is we will have different leaders. If there are physicians who will not tolerate this lifestyle, not from a blaming attitude, but more from not choosing this, physicians will stop choosing to be in these kinds of organizations. And the not choosing means that they leave, or they take over, or they create something new. Mm-hmm. And that's really what I so much hope to see, is that physicians won't choose to be in this kind of an organization.
That's awesome.
So they have to change it. They have to take over. And then that's a whole separate, very practical, structural aspect that makes this even more entrenched, which is that physicians are not leading their own profession. And that shift needs to happen.
Yeah. The thing is, as more people get the levels of energy and take responsibility for it and proliferate it, the more that will be the culture. This will be sort of the way that people operate and evaluate each other and evaluate themselves. Yeah, an entire organization can really change just with a simple model like that, or just with understanding the emotional guidance system.
I guess the point that I would love to hammer home is that it isn't really addressing just wellness or knocking down the percentage of those burned out by a few percentage points. It's transforming the organization completely to be aligned with that. Mm-hmm. Look for those places where it works and what makes it work and how does it work. Which organizations are working, or which teams within an organization are working, and promoting those leaders where there's great engagement and great ability to see options. So we've talked through the levels of energy, and I think both of our strong beliefs that it can make not only a critical difference for an individual, no matter what field they're in, but that it is allowing us to create our lives rather than our current lives creating us. What would you recommend as a next step?
I guess there's a few next steps I could think of, sort of depending on where people are at. If somebody is a physician and they are like, all right, hell yeah, I get this. I want to raise my energy. I want to make a difference. I want to shake up my relationship to work and empower the people around me, maybe leave my organization or change my organization. This podcast is what I would recommend you really plug into. I mean, this work. If somebody's actually serious about transforming their workplace or leaving or whatever, like being a doctor that like lives a fulfilling life, I would have them check out your work. I would have them follow your podcast. So It's real for me.
Thanks. Well, Cory, you have been very generous with your time. Thank you so much. This has been great.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Well, that was terrific to sit in the sun talking with my daughter about stuff we both are passionate about. In my next podcast, I'll capture more of our conversation, and it'll be a short but potent episode. We'll call it a quick espresso shot podcast. Cory describes conversations that exist in what she calls a coaching container, and she will also dive into the meaning of the provocative phrase, if you're not happy, you're not helping. Okay, fact check time. I was wrong when I said level 3 energy can also be characterized as win-win. So here's the real scoop. Bruce Schneider has a description for the dominant thought about winning at each level of energy. Level 1, where someone feels victimized, is characterized by the thought, I lose. Level 2, which is the level of anger and conflict, right, wrong, good, bad, is characterized by the dominant thought, you lose. And level 3 is I win, not win-win. He says that at level 3, it's okay if you win too, but it's a must that I win. So that's pretty telling. This level is characterized as compromise and tolerance, but the reality is that I intend to get what I want. I just recognize that I must compromise in order to get there. Level 4 is you win. It's that generous service-oriented level. And level 5 is we both win. So level 5 is the authentic win-win. I want you to win. And I know I'll win too because I see possibilities everywhere. Level 6 is everyone always wins. And level 7 is winning and losing are illusions. I love that. We will provide links in the show notes to these materials, and a good place to find Bruce D. Schneider is on Facebook. Who do these other voices in the podcast belong to, you might wonder? I already mentioned the great kiskadees and the white-winged doves. The melodious blackbirds really make their presence known in this podcast, as well as some great-tailed grackles and orioles. The wonderful human being who took us on the 16-hour birding trek that Cory mentioned is Ichi, I-C-H-I, and he runs Ichi Birding Tours on the Yucatan Peninsula. Thanks, everyone, for listening, and as always, thank you so much for all of your care and caring.
Thanks for listening to the License to Lead podcast. Be sure to visit licensed2leadpodcast.com to join the conversation, access the show notes, and sign up for our newsletter. Leave us a message with your provocative question or your thoughtful comments. You might inspire a future episode of the License to Lead podcast. Thanks so much, everyone.